Hello. Welcome back to the Let's Talk Palace podcast, episode 2. We got really good feedback from the first one. Delighted to hear that you are all enjoying it. Today, as always, I am joined by Henry Swain. How you doing, mate?
I'm okay. It's been a couple of days of strange feelings. I wasn't actually at the game, but I sound like I was. I've lost my voice. I've not been very well. And there was a lot of shouting in my flat, which is in Central Hove, so I'm sure a lot of Brighton fans enjoyed that. It's been. This is going to be a bit of a chaotic episode, I'm sure, because we've got so much to break down. But I'm delighted as always to be back, and like you said, just want to mirror your thoughts. Thank you so much for all the support. It does mean a lot, and it obviously motivates us to keep doing this. So that's what we're going to do. So yeah,
E- Exactly, mate. And well, we're going to go straight in. Today, we're obviously going to talk about winning the Community Shield, 2 trophies in 3 months. But first things first, we have to talk about the depressing news because as a Crystal Palace fan, apparently you can't even get 24 hours of celebrations before someone chucks you with some horrible news. And that has been UEFA. We have been officially demoted to the Europa Conference League due to the ruling that we had made no attempt to move our shares into a blind trust by March the 1st. Now, I'll speak about it in a minute, but Henry, first thoughts, how are you feeling?
I mean, we could probably all see it coming. I think I said last week that I kind of rested on the fact that we'd be in the Conference League and kind of was trying to look at the positives of that. I'm still doing that. I think there are positives to it. It is just disappointing. We earn our place in the Europa League on sporting merit, and it's such a shame that off the field issues, no matter whether you agree with them or not, have ultimately tarnished that. I think that the cast statement was weird. I didn't really understand it. They talk about how they after review the board decided there was decisive influence. I don't understand how that's possible. We've had the owner of or the CEO of Sportsbank come out this morning. He was talking on the Palace Ways space just before we started recording, saying that the reason that they decided not to invest in Eagle footballs was because of the lack of influence that they have. So it is disappointing. I think that we can kind of stay on it all we want, but it's not going to change now. We are in the Conference League. That's the competition we will be playing in this season. So I think we just need to crack on. But it is obviously worth discussing. It is an injustice. If this was Chelsea, Man City, this wouldn't have happened. But unfortunately, that's the way that modern football is, and we kind of just need to swallow it up and crack on.
Yep, exactly. And just to cover off some points myself as well, you were exactly right. We won this on the pitch. And now the way football is going, it's all about everything off the pitch. Legal loopholes. That's the only reason we're not in this. You can still own multiple clubs in the same competition if you have a bit of paperwork signed that says you don't own the club, which is hilarious. That is laughable. And that's what we've lost out on. So we could have had as many owners owning as many clubs in the Europa League as we wanted, as long as they signed a piece of paperwork that said they didn't, which is obscene and a joke. That is massively disappointing. And that's all it is based on. I don't know where the sporting integrity issue would be now, because yes, we did miss that deadline, but John Textor has no shares in the club. So there is actually no involvement there. So it doesn't matter if we're in the same competition as Leon. So where was kind of maybe just a bit of common sense on that point? It's just laughable, and to make things worse, an example of how the big clubs get better treatment or better, or a few more things from those in control. Man City and Girona, perfect example. Last season, allowed to play in the same competition, but their blind trust agreement said that they couldn't make any signings between each other until September 2025. So this month, August 2025, Man City and Girona have done a transfer between each other, letting Victor Race go on loan to Girona. So it just shows there's leeway depending on how big your club is in terms of Manchester City there. So complete joke, hugely disappointing. But as you said, we do need to move on and focus ahead of what is going to be a very busy season now. So our playoff opponents, because we have to go through a playoff if you did not know, and we have to win 2 matches across that against probably Fredrikstad. How are you feeling about that, Henry?
I mean, I watched the first 60, 70 minutes of their first leg against Midtjylland, and I mean, Midtjylland are a decent side. They always do quite well in Europe, relatively to the level that they're at. They've got a handful of very nice players. But Fredrikstad, I mean, if I was talking, obviously been active on Twitter this morning, as a lot of us have been, and was saying that, people saying, oh God, I was talking about the irony of the fact that we qualified, yet we now have to play a playoff to play in a lesser competition. And you have people being like, I'm really worried about this playoff now. What if we lose? If we lose against Fredrikstad, we shouldn't be playing in the Conference League, let alone the Europa League. This is a game that we will win. We should win. The first leg is at home, I believe, so that gives you the chance to get a nice cushion. And the second leg is in the depths of wherever they are in Scandinavia. It's a very small town. I saw people saying that the town itself looks a bit like a Call of Duty map, and I think that's a fair comment to make. So yeah, I'd imagine that would be the case. They're 3-1 down at the minute. They're now playing the second leg away this week. And the reality of it is that, in 10 days' time, we now have a game that we need to prepare for. And that isn't a lot of time to kind of do the research that you need to do. I mean, I'm sure we'll get it done and I'm sure we'll be okay. And going off of how we played yesterday, we should be absolutely fine if we can, go toe to toe with the champions and ultimately run out winners, which I'm sure we're going to move on to at some point. A game against a team of Fredrikstad's stature should not be a concern.
Massively agree again, mate. Yeah, it is going to be a weird competition to be in terms of the quality of the teams we're up against. We will be one of the favourites, which is terrifying in its own way. And the preparation is worrying, especially when we're picking up a couple injuries and the squad depth isn't there. And, maybe we would have been given a lot more time to prepare if UEFA didn't give Lyon the world of time and allowed them to do everything possible to stay in the Europa League, which I keep on going back to. I'll try and not be bitter this episode, but I'm going to do a few things.
You also wonder why it took so long for this, even the hearing. Why did it have to be on Friday? Why couldn't it be at the start of last week and then the decision come? I understand why the decision was delayed until today. Obviously, they have the weekend off. There's a chance that they may have met this morning to exchange final paperwork and make the final ruling. But this decision could have been made sooner. It really could have. And, I'm never going to criticise the club for standing up for themselves, but there is an element where obviously hindsight's a wonderful thing, and you can look back and think, well, what a waste of time all of this was. But the club would not have appealed if they didn't think they had a chance of winning. I think we were in a good position to do that. We had strong arguments, and like I touched on right at the top of this episode, I don't see how the board have come to the decision they have, in the way that they have, claiming that Textor had decisive influence and control. Because we all know that he just didn't. That was never a thing. It's why he wanted to sell his shares, which is ironically why he didn't put his shares into blind trust. Because obviously, as we all know, because we've all become experts in this field, you can't sell your shares if they are in a blind trust because you don't own those shares. They're blind trusted. Then they're almost untouchable at that point. So yeah, it's just massively. There's loads of irony to it. Dan pointed out this morning that the final of the Conference League is played at the Red Bull Arena in Leipzig, which the world has funny ways of working, but that is a huge dose of irony. So now we just got to hope that we get there and we can win it. We can really, put a big middle finger up to UEFA in the process.
Exactly. We will do it the hard way as we always have done. As I said in the last episode, underdogs are loved until they start winning things. Sorry. So, we just have to do it the hard way. Positive though, of course, lifting another trophy, our third in 12 months, would be genuinely ridiculous, wouldn't it, mate? After not winning one for 120 years.
Oh, it's mental. I was saying to my missus, because we've been together for about 4 years, and she's kind of got more and more into the Palace, and then my younger brother, it was their birthday yesterday, so a lovely day for them. So happy birthday to George and Charlie. I'll give them a little shout out. But their missus were around for dinner last night, a big family dinner, and I was saying to one of their girlfriends, don't get used to this. This doesn't happen much. I think it was her first game she went to yesterday, so not a bad first game. But yeah, what a day. It's really important to kind of take the positives at the moment. We played really, really well. We looked good. I think we definitely could have won it if it went to extra time. No doubt we would have won it. We outshot Liverpool. I think we outworked Liverpool. I think that we definitely should have had a penalty. late on in the game. I'm not sure how that's not been given as a handball. But, here we are. Obviously, the situation with Alisson stepping off his line for the Eze penalty. But you said it perfectly. We always do it the hard way. We did it against City the hard way, rode our luck at times. We did the same yesterday. And I'm just hoping that we can. I feel like the team have had a taste for winning, and you could really see that yesterday. They wanted it badly, and I know we talk about the importance of the Community Shield, but I think it's important that essentially this is the Super Cup of English football, and I think that if it was called that, it would be taken a lot more seriously. If it was a different name on the trophy, it would be a much bigger occasion. You look at Italy and Germany. This is like the biggest game of the season. Whilst it's the curtain raiser, it's also like this is the pinnacle of domestic football in those leagues. And I think we could maybe do a bit better to take a bit of inspiration from that. This is an incredible achievement. I think we're the first. James Alcott pointed out yesterday that we're the first unique team to win it in 35 years or something like that, which is incredible. So we should be very proud. We should be very pleased with the performance. I mean, what did you think? Obviously, you were at the game. What did you think of the day, the atmosphere? I understand there was some trouble getting into the stadium, etc. What were your thoughts on all of it?
Yeah, well, first of all, the environment and the mood was just amazing. It just felt like a celebration of what we did last season and winning the FA Cup. And it's the first time I've had to go to Wembley and have no stress. It was amazing because at the end of the day, you win it, it's a major trophy, and you lose it and you kind of brush it off because, some do not glorify it as much as arguably you said. So, really good. I was fine getting in. I got in a little bit early anyways. But yeah, I heard there was a lot of mess to do with the queuing and people missed start of the game. But it was absolutely surreal to just be in there before the game. Atmosphere was great. Just it was such a celebration. It was really, really nice to see. And obviously, performance to go 1-0 down at Wembley to the Premier League champions 4 minutes in. This team that spent like 300 million this summer when you spent only 3 million, you think the worst. But this is just the Crystal Palace we've got today where they do not know when to give up. And it is so, so amazing to see that mentality from this squad. That starting 11 is amazing. And yeah, it was a really good performance. For the most part, it's brilliant. To go 2 goals down in 20 minutes, you don't want to do that. You should be doing that. That is the negatives. But to pull it back twice in really good fashion and to dominate that second half like we did in terms of, kind of nullifying Liverpool as much as they were strong in the first half. In the second half, they were nowhere near it. And then to do something so good and win on penalties, something we never really do, was even better. It was even sweeter. So amazing performance. And Henry, how does this feel for you in terms of like, obviously Glasner's up there on that pedestal, but how much does these type of games just show how good a manager he is?
I mean, it is. We're going to touch on his future and what he can go on to do later, but he is. For me, he's the best manager we've ever had. I think tactically, he's so astute and so just nuanced, and he says these things like about Pep when they beat us in the league. If we meet him at Wembley, he can't do the same thing because we will fix it, and he's proven time and time again. And I think what I really enjoyed yesterday was Arne Slot's post match interview. And I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'm not sure if people listening have seen it, but he was extremely heavy with his praise for Palace and for Glasner. And he said, I expect this team to be a right pain in the arse basically next season because they don't know when, like you said, we don't know when we'll be. You always feel it was weird. I'll ask you how you found it. The first sort of 50, 60 minutes were weird. I didn't feel like I was watching Palace playing a game that I particularly cared about. And there were also not many chances in that kind of opening hour or so. It felt like we had the goals, but other than that, it was just a bit of a nothing game. And I had a couple of friends around to watch it, and one's a Liverpool fan, one's a QPR fan with Palace supporting family, so everybody wanted Palace to win. I don't know if I said Liverpool. He's a United fan. And it was just a weird atmosphere in my living room where we were just kind of like we didn't really care. And then I think there was one moment where Ekatike, and they didn't show any replays of this, but he ran straight into Hughes and kind of kneed him in the head, completely off the ball, and it didn't get touched on whatsoever because I think there was we had quite a big chance just after it. But at that point, I was like, no, you know what? I'd really quite like us to win this, and it started meaning a bit more. But yeah, I think it was a weird game. We go down early, and you're like, oh god, new player coming in, great finish. Ekitike, who obviously was linked with us heavily last season.
Mate, he looked really good, didn't he?
He looked brilliant. I mean, that little flick on in that transitional play that they did was absolutely outrageous. And you look at the likes of Verts, who the commentators were very heavy with their praise for Verts. He was good. Don't get me wrong, he was good. But they were talking about him like they just watched Messi play. And I thought it was a bit over the top. I don't know what did you think seeing him in person?
Yeah, I think you can see where the quality is, but I feel like he's also going to get a lot of plaudits for lesser performances. When in my head, I kind of think the other way because of his price tag. He needs to be consistently doing that. But I do think they've got a player there. It's just maybe yesterday he didn't show it as much as he possibly has done at Leverkusen yet. I think if you haven't seen him before, you maybe would have praised him quite a bit more than maybe if you had watched him before, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
Because he's capable of better. So yeah, that was kind of nice that we got him.
I think there was an element of it as well where you noticed. I saw some. I was watching loads of like kind of reactions yesterday just to kind of get an idea of how people were feeling. And also it's always nice to hear people praise Palace, which a lot of people did. But there was I watched Lawrence McKenna's reaction video, and he's always very on the line. He's very fair with his assessment, but he spoke about the referee and the number of fouls that we got and the number of fouls that we didn't get against us. And I just didn't understand that point. I know there was obviously in the build up to Sar's goal, Hughes brought down Ekitike, Gakpo, sorry, but it wasn't a foul. And I think the referee did well to kind of actually be like, welcome to English football, lads, especially to Ekitike and Verts. I remember Verts getting very agitated at numerous decisions where, he went down ridiculously softly and just expected a foul because I guess that's what he's used to back home in Germany. But I think going off that, Will Hughes was just transformative for our performance. He was so good. I mean, we all love as fans, big crunching tackles. I remember I was watching Bristol City play Sheffield United the other day, and their right back, I can't remember his name, but does the same thing. Just every tackle, he's just bang bang as hard as you can, as if he were a fan on the pitch. But Will Hughes' performance he was incredible to come on 20 minutes into the game, and obviously we wish Daichi the best of luck with his recovery. He was not playing well though, so I don't know maybe if he had a knock before the game and he was carrying an injury into the game because he was not playing at his usual standard. But Hughes was, oh my goodness, I can't even put words into to describe how incredible he was, especially watching from home. I know that when you're in the ground you kind of get a different perspective on things, but watching from home, Hughes was everywhere. Every challenge, transitionally, he was brilliant. He doesn't lack the kind of pace that maybe we thought he once did. He was just superb. So who kind of stood out for you being at the game?
Mate, there was so many outstanding performances yesterday. You're right, Will Hughes, when he came in, despite not starting that game, he was really, really good for us. Really strong, really good defensively. That was really good. I thought Mark Gay was a class above yesterday. I thought he dealt with so much so well. He was so important for us in that game. Of course, Sarr, ridiculous, involved for both goals, winning the penalty, and the finish was so good. That was amazing to see. And for me, I thought Walton grew into the game, but his passes again were really essential. And finally, Munoz was different gravy. He is so important to us. It's actually ridiculous. I do worry if he ever does pick up an injury because he's just so good. And for me, one of the best right backs in the Premier League. But if I had to pick one specifically, like my man of the match, it's hard, but I would probably just say Ismaila Sarr. He was just so good. And mate, how important is Ismaila Sarr for us this season?
Yeah, he's massive. I mean, we all spoke about, replacing Elise and replacing his output. I mean, he's certainly done that. He's replaced the output perfectly in terms of goals and assists. I don't actually have the numbers to mind, but from memory, he's definitely matched, if not better, that. Obviously, a very different type of player. And Elise has gone on to win to be nominated for a Ballon d'Or, and has been Bayern's best player last season. So we all knew that was going to happen. But to replace a player like that, to come in with that kind of pressure and expectancy to kind of hit the ground running and just do well straight away, and he's done that, and he was a huge part of all of the success last season. Obviously, excuse me, his brace in the semi-final, and yesterday he looked like he's just going to continue where he left off. The finish was just brilliant. I mean, the way I think it was very naive of Van Dijk to try and play an offside trap in that way, almost on his own. Nobody else stepped. But you can't give him that space one-on-one. But also, you're against Alisson, who is the best goalkeeper in the world, and we saw it consistently. Long balls being played over the top, and he's just always there. He's always there. The chance just before the penalty with Mateta. As much as I believe in Mateta, you can just tell that one-on-one against Alisson, no one is necessarily that confident because he's just so dominant. But the finish was incredible. I mean, off the near post and in, it was almost inch perfect.
Yeah,
I think
so good from him.
I think, like you said, man, I think he's just going to be so important for us this season. And if we can keep him fit and we can, keep playing to his strengths, which we do, then there's no doubt that he's going to be brilliant. I think, there were a couple of performances I wasn't, thrilled with. I thought Lacroix had a bit of an off day. Defended well, especially in a couple of one-on-ones he had with Salah. On the occasion he got past Ty, which was quite rare. But his passing was poor. It just felt like a lot of punted long balls, very hopeful. Maybe just a bit rusty. So we'll let him off. But the last person I mentioned would be Dino. I mean, he was superb. And we talk about strikers having the kind of arrogance in penalty shootouts and the confidence to score, but Henderson has that obviously on the other foot. And I think, it's just his whole performance, doffing his cap to the Palace fans after saving McAllister's penalty. That takes a lot of balls to do something like that. And then obviously for Justin to step up. And I think after the game, Dean said that, he said to Justin, I'm happy to take it if you don't want to. And Justin just said, I'm going to score it. And he did. And it was the best penalty of the lot, maybe bar Szoboszlai's. But yeah, it was just such a well-rounded team performance. I think everyone grew into the game. I think, I was a bit concerned going into it with how we've played in some pre-season friendlies. That, you're now going up against the best team in England. And we just rose to the occasion, as we did in the final, as we did in the semi-final, as we did on so many occasions last season. And as I hope that we continue to do going into the new campaign.
Yeah, for sure. And just shout out Devaney for such a class finish to win the penalty shootout for us. And obviously, Glasner, so important for us. There has been a lot of debate this week or last week in the build-up to the Community Shield around the future of Oliver Glasner. Some of the quotes he said, maybe people have taken them a bit too, I don't want to say seriously, but they've looked at them in a negative light. And it has raised a debate on whether he would walk if he didn't get any players in. There is a huge worry across the Palace fan base that he may even just leave next summer when his contract expires, because there is no talks at the moment over a contract extension, which he did, to be fair to him, say that's because we're focusing on the transfer window right now and other things. So he didn't say there aren't going to be talks. And to be fair, in the interview yesterday, when talking about the squad, he sounded like he was there for more than a season. He wanted to be there for more of a season with stuff he was saying. Obviously, the squad isn't there yet. But for me personally, Henry, I don't see Glasner ever walking before his contract expires. One, that costs him a lot of money. And two, I just think the type of man he is, I know he's going to get aggravated, and his history at other clubs has shown he does complain when he doesn't get what he wants, which is completely fair in his own right. But I just personally can't see him walking when there has been so much success at the moment. What do you think? And that's mid-season I'm talking about. What do you think, mate?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I put a tweet out. It maybe was a bit out of frustration after Gesson went to Villa. I've later learned that Villa came in and offered 10 million euros more, and also a lot more in terms of wages. So you can't really compete with that. I do still stand by what I said. I received a fair bit of backlash from especially kind of the older heads on the Palace Twitter space. I still stand by what I said though. I think that this is the best manager in the club's history. He's now led us to two trophies, our first two trophies of any significance, and he does have history for when I said walk, I didn't necessarily mean that next week he's going to pack up his office and leave. It was more in the sense that if you back him and you make certain promises, which we know has happened, and I've been told numerous times, you weren't in those conversations, the promises weren't made to you, but the manager's come out and said it himself, and that's as good as the truth for me. He's what I meant was more, if you deliver on what you say you're going to deliver, and you say that we're going to make signings earlier because last season it hindered the start of the campaign, and then you don't do it, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to just sack it off and leave. But what it does mean is that he's going to be a lot less likely to agree to a new deal, because you're going to make the same promises again and then once again not follow through with them. There's been loads of debate about our squad depth, and I've again been very present on social media about this, and I don't think that right now we have a good enough squad to compete across what could end up being 60, 65 games next season. We spoke about the kind of the squad rules last week, and we laughed that we're nowhere near breaching any of those. But I do think we now we have the verdict. Now we know what the situation is. Now we know how much money we're going to have, and we can forecast that. We do now need to start making some movements. And I'm not talking about spending 40, 50 million on individuals and, shaking things up that way. But we just need depth. We need quality and depth. There's plenty of players out there that we could go for. The likes of Juve that we mentioned last week, that can come in and bolster the squad, because yes, we have a superb starting 11. And I know that there was a lot of heavy praise yesterday and people saying that we could be pushing for a top 6-7 finish. I don't necessarily agree with that over an entire campaign. Not to be negative, I'm just being realistic. But if we were to do that, we need depth. We need more players. We need more options. We need, competition. At the moment, our only replacement for one of the back three is Lerma. At the moment, we have 4 options in central midfield, where maybe you'd ideally want more than that. Right wing back, we don't have the depth other than youth players. And up front, it's Mateta or Edouard now that Nketiah is injured for 2 months. And I'm not confident with Odsonne Edouard playing because, for whatever reason, he couldn't get any minutes at Leicester. So I think we do need signings. And I think I'm really hopeful that now that this is all out of the way, that, we can actually just get on with it now. Like I said, we know what budget we have. We know how much money we've got. But yeah, I don't. Glasner's not going to walk. I agree with your comments about his kind of integrity and him as a person. But it was more so, and maybe it was badly worded by myself, but it was more, you're not going to be able to convince him to stay further because, we can talk about this, and me and you probably both agree that he's got a future far above where we are. And that's just the reality of it. So, yeah, I mean, I'll hand it back to you, but what do you think about kind of that discourse and also Glasner's situation himself?
So for me, I think, to be fair, when we were struggling last summer and in January, again, this Glasner will walk from some of the Palace fans who are very, very adamant that he's going to walk mid-season. So not you in this case, don't you worry, mate. But so they were adamant he was going to walk even last season. I think it's just carried on from there because they understand how good a manager he is. They expect that if he doesn't get everything his way, he's going to walk. But I just think managers had this, managers, they have a different mentality. They have that winning mentality. They accept the challenge. They know it's not all going to be their way and they accept that and they move on. So it will be interesting, but it's all about the next steps now. So you have talked massively there about the squad depth, and that is a big issue, especially if we play them 60 games, like you said. So Crystal Palace now need to be proactive. What is the best way to go around doing that? Is it just literally get a couple players through the door and get them in maybe in a week or two max, or is there anything else you think we could add to that?
I think that it's a combination of, consistently maintaining the kind of processes that we've done that have got us to this point. Shopping in, lesser leagues and highlighting talent which we think can come in and make a difference. I think, like I mentioned, I think someone like Andy Duke would be a great signing, in the region of 20 million euros, where it's not like a bank breaker, but what it is you're getting a quality young player that can come in and can make a difference. But you kind of want these players that, I think our starting 11 is good enough to compete, like people were saying, for a top kind of 8 finish, and to qualify for Europe that way. But I think what you then have to consider is that if there are these injuries and you do lose players, that then is sabotaged in a way. I think that the best way to do it would be to continue our model of finding gems. Like Sosa's a great signing for 3 million. I think he was good yesterday. I was joking. I actually really liked his penalty. I know he missed it.
Yeah, it was class, I think.
But it was a really good penalty. It obviously not in the sense that it didn't go in, but it was hit well. It was unfortunate, and if that's just a couple of inches lower, you're talking about, geez, that's like, because it hit the underside of the bar, and it could have
I thought it went in
off,
from our end of the pitch. I honestly started celebrating.
Well, it could have bounced in off Alisson's hand. It did actually. It bounced down off the floor, hit the back of Alisson's hand. Unfortunately for them, trickled back towards him and not the other way.
Yeah.
But signings like that, you're going to get some players that aren't necessarily in favour. You look at the likes of Munoz, who we bought for pennies in respect to the player that we've got and how good he is, and also potentially profit we can make later on. So I think it's more of a, be smart, but we do need bodies. We need at least 2 or 3 more, I would say, maybe more than that. And I do think that now we have this verdict, it's not helpful that our chairman has been completely swallowed up by this ongoing saga, and I'm glad that that's finally over. But I think that Glasner's post-match yesterday, that was shared this morning from the changing room, really actually kind of got me back on the kind of, like you were saying, he's a good man. He knows that it's not going to be easy, and there just seems to be such a brilliant kind of rapport among the players and the staff and everything like that, and there is this kind of mentality that we touched on at the top of the podcast of, we don't know when we'll be, and that's good, and we don't know what our level is, and that's good. So it's going to be a really exciting season, but I think a few signings are definitely needed.
Yeah, I agree. And I think when talking about transfers, one thing to massively note, and it's something actually I heard Glasner say in one of his interviews after the game yesterday, he spoke specifically about the type of players they bring in, and not in terms of the ability, but in terms of the mentality. And that for me really kind of rung true. Like, this squad is the mentality is ridiculous, and I don't think you have anyone in that squad who kind of, is going to go out of their way to cause a scene. And I think, as we've seen with Rob Holding, if they don't have that right mentality, if they're not fully sold on this project, and if they're going to moan about it, Glasner's not going to involve them. So he has changed not just the quality on the pitch, but the quality in the dressing room, in the squad, just the whole shift in changing that. So the signings, as well as bringing a couple in, they have to be perfectly right. They have to understand what they're going to go into. So that will be really, really interesting to see moving forward.
Building on that as well, he's also completely changed the mindset of the fans, and I think that's a massive thing. You're completely right in all the points you've made, but I think almost the most important is changing the kind of viewpoint of the fans. Seeing a lot of people sharing their pictures from Wembley yesterday and saying, this is obviously remarkable. We've never been here in this way and be doing what we're doing. But now that we have this mentality, you're kind of not surprised. When the game started yesterday, and even when we were 1-0 down and 2-1 down, you're sat there thinking, no, this, I'm still comfortable that we could get back into this. Under Hodgson, for example, or even Vieira, in that scenario we were in yesterday, I don't think I would have been confident. You could probably see us just dropping back deeper and deeper and just trying to damage limitation, even though you're in a final in every aspect. But I think that the most important thing is the way he's kind of just inspired the fan base. And, like you said yesterday, you went there and there's no stress. It's a reward for winning the FA Cup, but it was also like I didn't feel stressed that, we were ever out of the game in any way. And, for large parts of that second half, for the most of that second half, we were by far the better team. And to do that against a team like Liverpool, I mean, it's just light and day between where we were. I mean, if we'd sat down with ourselves now 3 years ago and explained the last 3 months, you wouldn't believe it. You would not believe a word that we were saying. And I think that's a testament to Glasner. It's a testament to Parish. I think he's obviously continues to run the club very well and smartly, Europa League situation aside. But yeah, I just think it's just a new culture at the club, and a new culture of winning, and a new culture of not expecting but knowing that we can do these things. And it's just such a good taster for what's to come. And that's why I really hope that we do give Glasner what he wants now before the end of the window, because if we do well in Europe, he might well sign another deal. He might sign a 3-year extension and then lead us into the Europa League next year. You never know. But
Yeah.
I do think that you've just got to kind of give him that backing and show that we believe in him, because he's given us everything and more. And I think the club do need to kind of give that back to him a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, massively agree with that. And well, season starts this week. Let's move on. Looking ahead to Chelsea, we'll briefly discuss this. It's definitely a winnable match, I think, and I think you would agree. Actually, how would you go about this in terms of this game? How do you think Palace can win this match?
I've got Chelsea as my favourites to win the league this year. It's a bit of an outside shout, but I just think they are so good. I think they absolutely dismantled AC Milan yesterday, won 4-1. They have so much quality and depth, and that could be what is our downfall next weekend. But we've shown that we can compete with the big boys, and we can disrupt things. And I think that if we stick to our game plan and our principles, that we can beat anyone on our day. It's about things coming together, and it all happening our way. And we could beat Chelsea, but we could also go and lose 3-0. And to be honest, if we lost against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge next weekend, I don't think obviously I'd be disappointed, but I don't think I'd be, pulling up any trees and being too upset about it, because for me, this is one of the most exciting teams in the country this year. I think they're going to do well in the league. They're going to do well in Europe. They're going to do well in the domestic cups. And I think, the only thing we can do is stick to what we know, stick to our principles, and play the way we like to play. We did that against Liverpool. We did it against City. We don't change how we play for anyone. And I love that about Glasner's tactical approach and how he sets us up. We will always play to our strengths. And it's about, okay, come on then, show us what you can do. Stop us, limit our chances, limit our counter attacks. And teams can't do it because we are really well drilled and really good at it. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
I think it's a winnable game. It's a season opener. I think having the Community Shield, no matter how you look at it, is a great way to start the campaign, because it's a competitive game. It means a lot, and that also benefits Chelsea in the sense of the Club World Cup. And I know they've had a few friendly stints, but I do think that the teams that have been playing in actually competitive games, and games that mean something over the off season, they're going to be better prepped, because we've essentially had our first Premier League game already in terms of player fitness and how it's going to impact us. So I'm excited. I'm not, expecting a win, but at this point, you just never know with Palace. We could go there and cause an upset.
yeah, definitely. We can win, and I think it's actually going to be essential that we try and get that lead. I think taking the lead is going to be very important against this Chelsea side. They do have Colwill injured. That is a really big injury for them, and I think Mateta can capitalise off that, and Eze can capitalise off it as well. So that'll be really interesting. But I just think in this game, yes, we came back twice against Liverpool, but I do think defensively, Chelsea are a better unit at the moment than the likes of Liverpool. So getting that lead, hopefully keeping that lead, is going to be really essential. Chelsea are going to be well up for this game because obviously they won the Club World Cup. The atmosphere is probably going to be good for the first 5 minutes, and then it will be absolutely rubbish. But you've got to deal with that first 5 minutes, and then the first 15 minutes of how Chelsea play, adapt to it, and then push from there. You definitely can't be conceding in the first 5 minutes, that's for sure, like we did against Liverpool. And yeah, players like Walton got to be at their best. Munoz as well got to be on top form. Munoz v Cucurella is going to be a really, really interesting battle. I think they're two of the better players in each squad. So we'll see how that
That's
Colombian
going to be a
flair
cracker,
goes.
actually. I hadn't thought of that, but that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, so that'll be really, really exciting. Henry, anything else to add, mate?
No, I think the only thing I'll say is that obviously we're all disappointed. I'm disappointed. You're disappointed. Every Palace fan's disappointed. The players will be. The manager will be. The staff will be. But we're in the reality that we're in, and we can only do what we can. And in this circumstance, that is compete in the Conference League and do our best to win it. And I think we can do that. So I'd encourage people and implore people to attempt to be as positive as we can in the circumstance we find ourselves in. And yeah, man, after yesterday, I'm so happy that football's back. It was just so nice to watch Palace play, even though I wasn't there. It was just like it just felt right, and it's been it always is a period of kind of just sitting around twiddling your thumbs a little bit. But now it's back. I'm excited. I'm also excited to see us against a good opposition and to test ourselves further. And I'm sure we can get a result. We did well there last season. Obviously, Eze scoring a lovely goal. So yeah, we're the team that have, by the looks of it, come to disrupt things. So I think I just implore everyone to now turn your focus away from the disappointment of the CAS ruling and actually kind of look towards the season with optimism, hope, encouragement, and excitement. Really.
Yeah, massively agree. Fully back the team, fully realise what we could achieve this season. I think as everyone will, all the fan base will, as we always do, get behind the boys, be the 12th man. And it's a really exciting season ahead, no matter what. Let's see how we do against Chelsea. It'll be really interesting. That has been it for today's episode of Let's Talk Palace. We hope you have enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you are on YouTube, and if you're on Spotify, be sure to follow. Let us know what you guys think. Where could Palace finish in the Premier League this season? Let us know in the comments. And yeah, we will see you later.